In this video, we're going to talk about exactly the steps that I used to take someone from absolute zero to a champion in less than 365 days. We're going to split this up into 3 phases, and we're going to outline each one of those phases in extreme detail so you can get started on this today. What do I mean by champion? Let's be clear. I'm not saying you're going to be a WBC world champion in a year from zero. Now, you could do a lot more than what I had this person do, which I'm going to reference in this video, where I took them from absolute zero boxing experience to winning a Golden Glove state title, going 3-0 in the tournament. And they had zero boxing experience, and they only had a few months of training. So it was less than a year, okay? But heck, people like George Foreman, I think on his maybe 24th or 25th fight, won the Olympics, all right? So all these things are possible. Now, are they probable? Not quite probable, but definitely probable with this person. I'm going to reference my first Golden Glove champion that I produced in just a few months of training, and he had zero boxing experience. That's what I mean by champion. Now, this individual that I'm referencing, like I said, my first guy that I ever built from scratch that won a state Golden Glove tournament, he was a football player, actually, about 18, 19 years old. And he was coming back from football practice. Things weren't going the way at the camp or whatever that he hoped they would go, and it didn't look like maybe football was going to be his future. He happened on that bus, very fatefully, to meet a former world champion, Oliver McCall. And Oliver fought Lennox Lewis, and he had a long conversation with this future boxer, who at that time was just a football player, and basically convinced him to look at maybe pursuing boxing and attempting it. So very quickly after that, I think just within a couple weeks or maybe less, this individual walked into the doors of one of the first gyms I was working in and said, "Hey, I want to box." And okay, well, we got started on the journey. Now, with this video, it's going to be very important that you understand that we're going to go through the 3 phases. We're going to go through technical aspects, break that into 4 pieces. We're going to go through how we train those technical aspects, and break that into 4 pieces, and then go through all these other aspects so that you have everything you need to succeed. But you need to understand 3 macro concepts, all right? I've seen plenty of boxers lack this one thing, and they're not successful. All right. They have everything else, but they lack this one thing. They're not successful. What's that one thing that is a prerequisite for becoming a champion and becoming successful at anything? You have to have the will to do so. Where there's a will, there's a way. All right. Now, there's other things too that go along with that. You can have all will and not the next 2 points I'm going to talk about and not be successful as well. But you can have everything, all the talent, everything required, all the resources, but not the will, and you're not successful. You see that all the time with guys, right? You see them get up to certain levels, whether it's in amateurs or professionals, obviously most popular in professionals of people you can think of, where they just didn't have the will to win. The will, though, to not only win that day, because that's something. You have people that have the will to win in the preparation for training. They consistently show up to training and work hard and do everything they need, but then when the day comes or the night comes where it's time for them to step in that ring and to turn on and to win, they don't turn on, all right? And this is something you can control, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, you also have individuals that they are going to turn on the day of their fight, the night of their fight, but they don't have the will of consistency to train, to do that often enough and consistently enough over time that it actually makes a difference. It allows them to get to the levels they need to get to, right? So we have to have the will to win, the champion mindset. Now, the skill as well. We have the skills and the will. We got a package, because if you have no skills and you're all will, hey, it's only going to take you so far, and it can take you fairly far sometimes. But if you combine that with skills, with proper technique, and all the timing and things required. Remember, skill encompasses a lot of things. It can encompass even power, right? You can have the skill to hit hard, the skill to throw punches certain ways that allow them to be more effective, right? And then the skill of timing, the skill of defense, skill of footwork, of course, skill of head movement, all those things. Very important. And you need those two things combined, but you can have those two things and it doesn't matter. You can have, I've seen plenty of guys have those two things and they completely fall apart. Why do they fall apart? Because they don't have the conditioning. The conditioning. And that, to be clear, you can have the will and conditioning and low skills and beat some people that maybe have just two of the three, right? Maybe they have the skill and the will, but they don't have the conditioning. You got the conditioning and the will, and you can just beat a better boxer. It's possible. And then it's funny too, because then it becomes a question of, well, who's actually a better boxer, right? You can have a guy throwing round, loopy punches, right? And just looking absolutely horrible. But if he hits you more than you hit him, and heck, if he TKOs you or knocks you out, in a sense, he's a better boxer in a weird way, right? Isn't that interesting? All right, so we need those three things, and I've definitely been guilty of this when I first started, of maybe only emphasizing the skill part, right? Or only the will part. I typically, but some coaches I've definitely seen, and some fighters I've definitely seen, only emphasize the conditioning part. If anything, the most complex things are the skill and the will. The conditioning is easy, dude. Just go balls to the wall, train hard, and do that consistently over time. You know, in theory, that's easy. If you do something and you do it hard over enough time, you're going to be in decent shape. And so oftentimes guys will be a little bit lazy mentally and not put in the work on the more complex areas that are a little bit more nuanced, the skill and the will. All right, so we're going to break up the techniques into 4 categories. So basically, this is the boxing techniques that you need to be successful, to go from absolute zero, assuming you have no boxing experience or very little boxing experience, or even if you have some boxing experience, this is also going to be helpful for you to go back to the basics. We're going to break into 4 categories, go over those categories, and then we're going to talk about a little bit later about how we implement this into our training and everything else. So you make sure you want to stick around for that. Now, this first category here, if you don't have this, it's like building your house on sand. It's not going to stand. And that is how you stand, your stance. The stance is so essential. I like to break up a stance into 4 basic pieces to think about it. You have your hands up, right? Because again, and to be clear, these are not all or nones. I mean, some of these are almost all or nones, but you see guys break these rules all the time, but they're good foundations to be able to go back to, because if you don't have this foundation and you don't have this to fall back on and go back to, it's going to be problems. So first one's hands up, then you have your chin down, and then you're sided up and you have your knees lightly bent. No matter how you stand, if you check off these 4 boxes, if your chin is up in the air, you're vulnerable. If your hands are down, you make people have to, you don't make people have to think to hit you. I had this happen with a guy just yesterday who had his first fight, did great. And I told him, dude, just keep your hands up, because your opponent isn't intelligent enough as a boxer to throw around your guard or break through your guard or set up things to get through it. So if he's not intelligent enough to do that, if you just hold your hands up, that is the dummy answer. That is sometimes the answer. Boxing can be simple. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. Again, I go into all the nuances, but it doesn't have to be complicated. All right, then if your knees bent, you got to have your knees bent. If you don't have your knees bent lightly, not deep, lightly, you're not going to be able to move, not going to be able to have balance, and that balance rather. And so your reaction time is faltered, and also that's a sign of fatigue, a sign of you not having that conditioning that we talked about earlier, and we're going to expand upon later in this video. If your legs are locking out, that's something I had problems with initially when I started boxing. I wasn't used to that light bend of the knees all the time throughout the entire round, and I'd lock those legs out and make it so I would have to bend the knees before I did anything, and you don't want to be in that position, all right? And then side it up, makes you less of a target. Now, granted, again, you see plenty of fighters with their chin up, their hands down. Most people are sided up, but some aren't, and sometimes they lock their legs out. Typically they don't, though. That's almost, you could say, the one like universal, right? Because again, if those knees are bent, you can't do anything. All right, but you can do all of this. Check these 4 boxes, but with this next concept, understands, have some problems. Sometimes when you throw your 2, right, if you're orthodox to your right hand, or southpaw to your left hand, but orthodox to right hand, most people, 70% people are, 75% are right-handers, you're going to throw right hands, and you're going to get nailed by right hands, all right? And you're going to get nailed by more punches as you throw punches. This next tip on stance is going to allow you to get hit less while you're throwing your combinations. That is to be concaved off the side. As you see here, with Benny Briscoe, he is leaned a little bit off to the rear side. What does this do? This allows him not only to have the shoulder a little bit in the way of punches coming from his lead side, like twos. But also, as he throws his two and his punches, his head's going to lightly come offline just a little bit, enough to make his head a little bit elusive, to move the head as we throw. Not move the head in between throwing punches, which is also important and helpful, but as we throw punches. All right? So that's a very important concept to implement. That little bit of that concave stance. Sugar Ray Robinson, all those guys. And I did that with this guy. A little bit of that concave position. He's not straight up and down. He doesn't have a stick through his back that makes him just stand up straight, like a Muay Thai fighter almost. You're concaved off. And also this allows you, if you're orthodox, to have less work you need to do with that rear hand to be defensive. All right? Because the liver's more protected, and the rear hand, the right hand, has to do less traveling to go up and down to block the body shots and the head shots from a same stance opponent that with their threes. Now, the next thing as well is going to allow us to produce more power in our stance. All right? You can produce power any way, shape, or form. Right? You could throw punches in a lot of funky ways and produce power. Okay, and I want to be very clear about that. But this little tip, you'll notice, helps increase a little bit of your turnover with your punches, your snap with your punches, and that's going to allow you to have a little bit more power with those punches and bounce brains in the skull, which is what's going to create concussions, which is what we want to do to our opponent, not to us. And that is to have our palms facing in. Right? This is a foundational piece that my father was really big on, was having those palms facing you. Not extreme, but just facing you. So that right hand or rear hand is facing you to the side, like you see here with Marciano, and the lead hand is facing in a little bit towards your face, like you're reading something on your palm. This allows you to get that maximal turnover at the end of the punch, which is going to theoretically produce more power and can be helpful. Now, what's interesting about this too, though, is that I have trained many people like this, and then over time, I have seen it, and I've noticed this with myself, that it actually allows you to get a feel for certain ways to throw punches or how to throw punches with that snap and turnover from that position, that then therefore when you're not in that position, it still helps. It's really weird. I can't really give a good articulate explanation of it, but I noticed that when I adjust somebody and help them get in that position, and then they work like that for a little bit, then all their other punches have more snap on them regardless of their position. All right? It's almost like a primer. It's interesting. That's something I need to take a deep dive in sometime. All right. Then the next thing under stance we're going to talk about is very important. It's going to be very important as you get fatigued, right? Because even in a 3-round fight, you might get fatigued in the third round if you're fighting hard. You should get fatigued a little bit. But it's going to allow you as well to have, again, that solid foundation as you progress up levels, hopefully, that maybe you are going to fight pro or fight more than 4 rounds as a pro, fight 6 rounds, fight 8 rounds, and then maybe get up to that 10 and who knows, maybe get up to the illustrious 12, right? When you're actually fighting for a world title. Now, also, you could have titles at 8 rounds, but obviously, your big ones that anyone cares about is 12. Now, this next one's going to allow you to do that and also protect the thing that is the hardest thing to move, right? The head we can move easily, but the body is going to be hard to move, right? Versus just moving the head and things like that. So we want to keep those elbows more in. Like you see here with Joe Louis, he has those elbows in, relax to the side, helps keep the hands up naturally. With your stance, almost think about like curling a weight. And if you were to curl a weight, you wouldn't have your elbows flared out. You'd have your elbows in, kind of supporting that weight. It's only your biceps that are holding up the weight. And in this position, it's really only your biceps that are holding up your hands. All right. You can say, oh, well, the hands up are not up high enough and everything else. Well, guess what? They're kind of in that nice, happy middle ground where they could be popped up to defend a punch. And it's also a very good position to throw from. It's a nice, relaxed position to throw from that helps you throw with your body as opposed to arm punching. All right. Now, the next topic we're going to talk about, going on from stance, is how we're going to get to places. All right. How are we going to do our thing? I see so many people in their training with mitt work, with bag work, with shadow boxing. They're stationary. They don't move. Or I see that, but then also I see people spend a lot of time and frankly waste a lot of time on a lot of fancy things that they can do movement-wise that are not beneficial. All right, so let's talk about this. Their footwork. With their footwork, with this person that I'm referencing, that I only took them from 0 to a few months, going 3-0 in a Golden Glove tournament for Georgia and winning, and I think they got like a TKO in that process too. I can't remember. But we didn't work on cutting angles, and we didn't work on the ollie shuffle. We didn't work on a parallelum sidewinder step, whatever craziness, cool thing that you think of, right? That stands out as a highlight reel, but is not essential to winning a fight or to becoming a champion in 365 days. All right, what do we work on? We work on forward, backwards, lateral, and circular movement. That's it. You need to be able to go forward, and to be clear, go forward in a straight line. I know some people are like, oh, what? What the hell? That's sacrilege. You don't go forward in a straight line. Yeah, guess what? Your opponent doesn't want to go back in a straight line. That's bad, and we can all agree upon that. Unless they wanted to only do it like a couple steps to sucker you into something. But you go back in a straight line, where do you end up? You end up on the ropes. We want to do that. And if we can't go straight forward with our chin down, being protected, we're going to have problems. If we always attack at an angle, at a circular motion, that's going to be problematic, right? So we need to be able to go forward. We also need to be able to go backwards, right? Straight back for at least a couple steps, but then we need to be able to cut off to the side. So we need to have that lateral movement to also allow us to cut off the ring. But then also we need to be able to circle. Again, referencing to a guy who fought his first fight under me yesterday and won a unanimous decision, it was the commands were sometimes to circle with their jab off to the side and circle around. And that is very, very, very important because you're turning your opponent, having to make them recalibrate their aim and everything else. Very important concept. So you need to be able to circle, you need to be able to go forward and backwards in straight lines and be able to move laterally. All right. Now, to be clear, though, don't go backwards in a straight line more than a couple steps unless you're trying to sucker someone into something. And then after that, you need to be cutting off to the side. All right. Now, going on to our defense, because we can have the stance, we can have the footwork, but we can lack on our defense. And where this becomes problematic is when you do happen to get stuck, or if you ever do happen to get stuck, right? Let's say that footwork gives out for a second, or you're going against someone who knows how to nullify your footwork, and you're in a position where you're in a corner, you're on the ropes for a moment. You need to be able to have that defense. Also, defense allows you to do proper countering and things like that, which again, you need to be able to do. Your first fight, second fight, third fight, fourth fight, whatever level, all right? Now, the first thing with defense, the most quintessential basic thing is, what is the most important punch in boxing? Feel free to comment below, right? But we all know what it is. So you have the most important punch in boxing. You need to be able to stop the most important punch in boxing, but you not only need to be able to stop the most important punch in boxing, but you need to be able to throw the most important punch in boxing while you stop the most important punch in boxing. Does that make sense? So we need to be able to catch jabs and catch straights. We have our rear hand in front of our face. Now you see here with Kenny Norton here, beat Ali. So Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, both beat Ali. Is the rear hand in front of the face. Now it's on his face, right? But whatever. We're stopping the shot. We're not getting hit clean by a shot. Ideally a little bit, couple inches off or whatever. But again, that's Ali's right hand coming through. Ali had a good right hand, and you see Ken's jabbing and Ali slipping off to the side, and with the right hand, great move there. But we need to be able to catch those straight punches and catch those straight punches, catch the jab as we jab. So therefore, we can match jabs with them. If every time they jab, you need to not jab, that's problematic. Now, you could do a jab and a slip every time, but that also becomes problematic. That's more movement. That's more trouble. That's harder to do. And it's going to be a little bit more challenging in our journey from going from zero to being a champion in 365 days or less. All right. Now, the next thing, very basic, but we need to know how to block punches. All right. The greatest defensive fighters in the history of boxing blocked punches as well as had head movement. All right. They blocked punches. And blocking punches basically is easier to do as far as coordination than anything else, because it also depends on your athleticism. If you are a good athlete, yes, you can absolutely use your footwork to avoid punches, and yes, you can absolutely use your head movement to avoid punches. But depending on your makeup, your build, everything else, being able to have those hands. And then also, if you even are all those things, and like I said, you get stuck in a position, the legs give out, or you're on the ropes or whatever, you need to be able to have that lock on the door, which is the hand defense. All right. Very big on this. You could call me old school for it, but I'm very, very big on it. And it allows you to get more counters. All right. Now, with this individual that I'm talking about, because I was coaching based off of, I was just, for my first 3 years of coaching, because I was mentored by my father as a boxing coach, and he was a boxing coach for about 40 years or so, is and around boxing for 50. I coach exactly how he coached, right? And that's how we should all do it, right? You should do your best to be able to replicate exactly who you're mentoring under and just be a duplicate of it, and then eventually build on your own things and make your own distinctions and discoveries, right? So with this individual that I'm referencing for this video, we didn't do much head movement at all, if any head movement. It was just maybe Maybe some slips as we shoot a punch, like you see here with Usyk and Fury, right? Slipping as he's shooting a two. That type of thing was our head movement. Maybe sometimes slipping with the jab, and that was it. That was it. There was no elaborate, slipping and pulling and weaving and everything else with this guy. It was just we're catching, we're blocking, and we're slipping as we throw. And that's it. Because at the end of the day, we need to throw punches. And there's the idea of my dad's philosophy and Bodak's philosophy was to not move your head unless you're throwing a punch with it, right? Which is interesting philosophy. It's a little extreme in black and white, but it is interesting philosophy. It's good to think about these extreme concepts and dial it into our training a little bit and maybe help us realign. Then, of course, there's the less extreme philosophy, which is that you need to, after you move your head, throw a punch, right? That's a little less extreme philosophy, but that's also very important to encompass because how often do we all move our heads and things like that and don't throw a punch, right? It makes someone miss 3 punches and we don't throw anything back. And sure, they missed 3, but we're both at 0. We need to turn it from, they went 0 for 3 and we need to land something. Now, next, after that, we're going to talk about, we got our defense, we got our footwork, we got our stance, but again, we ain't going to win a fight like that. You need to be offensive to win a fight. So we're going to talk about our offense. When people throw punches, again, you can throw punches in a whole bunch of random ways, and it's totally fine. But something that my father is very big on, and I'm fairly big on, is being able to throw punches with the weight of the body and with the knuckles. Being able to generate power with the punches, because oftentimes someone can land a lot more punches, but with good judging, they don't win because the punches they landed are finger punches. They're slaps. They're hitting with the palm of their hand. They're hitting with the finger part of the glove versus the knuckle part of the glove. And that is a massive difference. In terms of power, as you see here with Mayweather hitting Marquez, he's turning that hook in and a slight bend of the wrist. So he's hitting with the knuckles with that left hook. And that is a good hook versus a lot of times in the amateurs specifically, but also you see it at many levels. It's slapping, 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 slapping. All right. And if you might slap your guy to death, but you might not get the victory, and you ain't going to be that champion, right? We got to make sure we're hitting with the knuckles with all of our punches. And sometimes I'll see guys do this with straight punches, with jabs. They'll have the wrist pointed up a little bit, and they'll hit them with the fingers. Same thing with the 2 as well. And they wonder why they're, 1, not hurting people, 2, why it's not scoring, right? Because, again, a judge might count it, but good judges won't, or at least if they catch it. So a very important concept there. And being able to throw the body weight behind the punch so it's not just arm punches, right? So they have an effect. Because, man, if you crack your person a little bit, even if they do score power or don't score power with the judging, it's still going to have an effect on somebody, all right? If they're not a tough SOB, it's going to have an effect. Even if they are a tough SOB, it makes them a little bit more concerned about everything that you do. Now, we can throw punches like this and be very successful, but it's all about how we set up the scene, right? You have to set up, your boxing match, set up the round, set up your life for success. How do you do that? And what's the easy way to do that? Easy way to do that is with the most important punch in boxing. But just because the most important punch in boxing doesn't mean you need to be conservative with it. You need to be very giving with that punch. And so that's where everything that I worked on with this individual was double jabs, double, triple jabs, but double jabs, not singles, doubles, double jab, double jab, double jab. And not only double jabs, but then after the double jab, there's a combination that comes. And after that combination, we're not done. We're going to double jab at the end. We're becoming a jab machine, right? And so you're starting off with double jabs. The brilliance of that is that if we're doing multiple jabs, they're not sure how many are going to come. If we do single jabs, a lot of fighters can stop a single jab and counter a single jab. But if it's a double, that can be enough variety and enough of a question factor to make them hesitate on their countering. Then we put our combos together, right? Because if you just combo and you don't set it up with a jab, it's going to be less likely to land. A great example recently with one of my boxers, I remember talking to them about this in sparring and then in their fight, is that, man, you land a lot more when you start jabbing again. This guy he would be jabbing and start landing punches. Then he'd get happy and start trying to lead with different punches and started missing more. And then he started jabbing back again and then start landing more punches again. Because the jab's going to do a lot of things. And then we finish with a jab. Why do we do that? We finish with a jab, or at least we train to do it so that hopefully we can do it most of the time or more often in our fights. because it's going to side us back up. It's going to allow us an exit. This is where we're going to use that circular pattern, right? You double jab, throw a combination, then you double jab off to the side to kind of exit out. So you're turning them, making their counters hard, also stepping out a little bit. So therefore, like a counter right hand and things like that are not going to be available. And then because you're doing a double jab, you're sided back up to your initial stance, which theoretically makes you less open. If you end with a 2, oftentimes you can be open for a counter, like a counter 2 and things like that. But if we side back up with the left hand or the lead hand, and with that jab, and get back to turning and using our feet, we're good. Very important concepts. All right. Now, the last thing is, like I said, the circle with the jab. See so many great fighters, Sugar Ray Robinson to whoever, right? Name them all. Being able to circle with double jabs, triple jabs, excellent and very important. Like I said, just yesterday, one of my guys, that was one of the main instructions that allowed him to control, actually 2 of our guys, control their opponents. All right. Now, how are we going to train these things, right? So we understand these concepts, but how are we going to actually go about training it? Are we going to, use double M bags? Are we going to use the speed bag to train the double jab? Are we going to use a tennis ball for our defensive reflexes and things like that? What are we going to do, right? What are we going to do to train this stuff? So here are 4 training techniques that we're going to get into. The first thing I'm going to talk about, anyone that's ever watched my stuff before, and if you've been around boxing for any period of time, you know exactly what I'm going to say is the number 1 here, all right? So no surprises here, but it's going to be shadow boxing, all right? Now, here's the key, though, with the shadow boxing, is it's not just the warm-up shadow boxing like you see people do. All right, it's not warming up, just loosening up and things like that. It is shadow boxing with purpose. It is shadow boxing not only with purpose, visualizing someone and doing all the defense and things like that, but everything they're throwing is maximum power, full extension. They're grabbing at the end of their punches, right? Maybe when they're warming up, they're not, but we're actually spending time doing rounds of hard shadow boxing where they are snapping their punches, just like they're hitting someone trying to freaking jack a jaw. And they are rotating, going through with their punches, challenging their balance so they have good balance so they're able to miss a punch and come back with another punch or react defensively, but most ideally miss a punch and come back with another punch that's going to hurt them even more because now you're torqued for more power. Very important concept. And also, too, if you're always missing punches, or if you're not used to missing punches and missing hard punches, your body's not conditioned for it. This allows you to get conditioned for it. Right? If you're only used to hitting a bag can be kind of easy. Shadowboxing hard, try it if you haven't done it, is hard. And it's going to get you into great shape. Now, the next thing is I actually did something that, I'm not, is not essential, but I did it for this individual. It was my first guy. I didn't have a lot of time, I had a lot of time, more time than I had now to dedicate to one person. But we still do this with fighters, and it's useful. But one thing is that it can be overused, and it can be used incorrectly, or just used in a way that's not really that beneficial. All right, and that is mitt work. We did mitt work, but what type of mitt work did we do? Again, this is stuff. It's like you can do a lot of things, right? You can do 50 other things along all of this stuff, but what we're distilling in this video are the quintessential, essential pieces to allow you to go from 0 to a champion in 365 days or less. All right, so we did only combinations. Only combinations. We didn't work a lot of defense with the mitts or things like that, or elaborate sequences. The elaborate sequences were putting combos together, not combos that mixed in head movement in between the combo or defense in between the combo. It was about putting the punches together, just putting them together. That's it. So you do the double jabs, you put the combination together, you jab off to the side, and you're drilling that round after round after round after round after round. And like anyone will know, if the mid holder is the one telling you when to start, man, now it's like fighting someone that's dictating the fight the whole time. It's really fatiguing, but then it also gets you in this mindset and this reaction where you are just unloading. Combination, combination, moving, combination. And you're jabbing, putting the punches together, finishing with the jab, siding up, and moving off to the side at the end. Bam. It's beautiful stuff. And then again, when they're jabbing, sometimes I'm jabbing with them. And that's why I like holding for the jab on the rear mitt, typically, because that allows us to test their defense as they're jabbing so they can catch and stop the jab as they jab. So therefore, if the other person doesn't catch a jab, their head's going to get snapped up with the jab, and we won't. All right, now we got the mitt work down. Now, how are we going to work the defense? Like I said, are we going to use tennis ball? Are we going to use the maze ball? Are we going to use like a double M bag to work defense? Are we going to use a towel to whip at them and use? No, we're not going to do those things. What we're going to do for defense is we're just going to do a defensive drill where me personally, I would throw at this person as hard as I can. As hard as I can, right? Start off, a little slow and things like that. But over time, just a month or so, you do it single shots. But so they get the ability to resist hard punches, block hard punches, catch hard punches that aren't going to slam into their own face. They get that feeling of that timing and resistance, and also confidence, right? Confidence to defend punches and be cool and calm under fire. All right, so very important concept there. Something that my dad always did with me, and I've done with basically all of my fighters. Then, actually, in one of my fighters, to the point where he got so good with it because of us doing stuff like that, that James Toney personally came up to us and said, "Your guy has world-class skill." And that's a great compliment from James Toney. Now, sparring. We got to spar. I know there's some people on here, maybe you're not quite a boxing person, you're kind of a martial arts person, or maybe you are a boxing person in a sense. But anyway, and you think because of different advancements that and different realizations in the combat sports community that sparring or hard sparring is not important. Well, I'm sorry to break it to you, but everyone that has started implementing less hard sparring and did things like that are already at a certain level. We're talking about taking you from zero, okay? And if you never drive the car at the speed or close to the speed that you're actually going to be driving it at, the car handles differently. The timing is different. And I've seen time and time again, guys that never spar hard go into fights when they're kind of more that beginner like we're talking about and get completely shell-shocked. All right? Now, conversely to that, because I'm not trying to just straw man the other argument, people absolutely spar too often, they absolutely spar too hard too often, and they absolutely treat sparring like a fight, meaning they go on way too long. This absolutely happens, and the most damage that happens to boxers, I think, is probably in the gym from excessive hard sparring after years and years and years and not proper rest and recovery. All right? So that's my little soapbox about sparring that I want to articulate out there for you guys, because I'm very big about protecting people and keeping them safe. Because also, too, sparring and not having good defense. You can spar once a week and not get hit very much at all. And therefore, it's pretty safe. But if you're getting tagged and nailed, you might need to take 2 weeks between hard sparring sessions, things like that. All right. But with this individual, the first time he ever sparred, first couple times he ever sparred, he literally turned his back. All right. So this guy, like I said, just in a few months went 3-0 and won that tournament, and then went on to be 9-1, and then went on his first open fight, fought the number one guy in the nation and lost. I think it was a split decision, but if it wasn't a split, it was a very close competitive fight that some people thought he won. And but his very first sparring session, he was turning his back against another guy that had no fights at that time and wasn't massive or anything, was the same size. So remember that for yourself. If you're starting out and you're kind of tucking your tail a little bit, as one of my fighters called it, and turning away and whatnot, don't worry. Don't worry. It doesn't matter where you're starting from. It only matters where you're going. That's all that matters. All right? And so getting that in-house sparring initially with other team members, right? Other people that you train with, absolutely great. Get comfortable. And typically don't try to murder each other, all right? Because you're all on the same team and you want to help each other grow. You can still go hard, but moderate it. And a big tip with that too, guys, is don't be afraid to take a knee in sparring. When you're sparring, don't get in the habit of being like, stop, because you're going to get nailed, right? Probably. But get in the habit of just taking that quick knee if things get too hot. And don't have too big of an ego about it, all right? Now, and also be okay with saying hey, I'm done for today, right? And of course, a good coach is going to help you do that, but also sometimes you need to do that for yourself, right? And only in certain situations is it a coach need to challenge you and be like, hey, you got one more today in sparring, because you can see that a person does have more, but they're kind of mentally breaking down, and you know that if they just use an adjustment, they can do a little bit more. But then next is you need to start doing some travel sparring. All right, so it's not only in-house work, but it's also travel sparring. We're going to other gyms or having other gyms come to you or other fighters come to you from other gyms, but specifically where you're going to other gyms where you're in an environment that you're not used to, just like your fight, right? Because your fights that you have, the more you can get used to, like, I'm going to spar in this random gym that I don't know anybody, everyone's mean mugging me, and it feels weird. And the ring is a different size, feels different, the canvas, the flooring is different, the ropes are really super loose, so if I lean on them at all, I'm going to fall through, which I don't recommend leaning on ropes a lot. Then, if you're not used to that stuff, it's going to be problems as you're working on this goal that we're working on together. So you need to, and also have those different styles, right? You have different gyms, different styles, and typically, I try my best to make sure our boxers box and fight in a manner that suits them. But sometimes you can have certain things in the gym that you see, that because you see your other guys do it, you see your team members do it, and so you're aware of those things. But then you go to another gym and you have a fighter there that's doing some random stuff you never saw before, and so it's important. And it's important because also too, you need to be watching film, so maybe you see it in the film, but to see it in front of you and learn how to deal with it is different. And also someone that doesn't give a darn about you, right? It's more of that fight feel, and it's very important as you're working to going from absolute zero to progressing to the level we're talking about. Now, next is we're going to talk about conditioning, because if we don't have all this, if we do all this stuff but we're not conditioned, it's like trying to run up a hill that's slick with mud and just raining. You're going to be sliding down all the time because you'll be progressing with skills in some ways. You will be getting better in some ways, but you're getting nowhere near your actual potential because you're not getting the proper conditioning. Oh yeah, and that's one thing as well. Before we go into that, this individual that I'm talking about for this video, we did almost no bag work. Almost no bag work, like basically zero bag work. Shadowboxing, mitt work, sparring. Shadowboxing, mitt work, sparring, drills, almost no bag work. The bag is not a necessary piece of equipment in the gym. I mean, really, as you guys know, because I'm kind of a purist, nothing is a necessary piece of equipment in the gym other than maybe a boxing ring, all right? And maybe mirrors, okay, so you can see technique. But outside of that, all this other stuff, it can be a waste of time. And if we want to maximize our time, and we only have a finite amount of time, we need to make sure that we do the most important stuff. I'm not saying you shouldn't hit a bag or ever hit a bag, but a bag is stationary. A bag moves in a way that opponent does not move, all right? You're going to move a lot more like how you're going to move in your fights in shadowboxing and in mitt work that's done properly. Let's talk about conditioning, guys. So the first things with conditioning is we need to be able to build up that ability to explode. All right, to explode with a combination viciously all over someone and be snappy. How are we going to do that? Are we going to do that with some super extensive protocol or some special exercise with bands, or, think of something fanciful? Well, no, we're going to do it simply. We're going to do it very simply with the least amount of tools. We're going to do it with sprints. Right? 100-yard sprints. It's going to allow you to get in a certain level of aerobic conditioning, but also anaerobic conditioning. And because when you're sprinting 100 yards and you're doing it fast, right? Do a couple warm-ups and then you sprint very hard. It's actually going to help build up your hand speed because of the chopping motion as you're running, as well as your feet speed, as well as your ability to just produce an explosion after an explosion after explosion. So 100-yard sprints, about 20 to 30 seconds break at the end of the boxing training is what we did. All right, because we're compacting it all together. So I would only have a certain amount of time in the day with this person. So we'd do our boxing work, then we'd finish off with sprints. We started off just doing maybe 4 or 5 sprints, worked up to about 8, 9, 10. And again, the first sprint or so, slower, so we don't, pull anything. But then we're going all out. I even have the drill where I have somebody be the rabbit, or I'm the rabbit, where your goal is to try to catch me before that 100 yards is over. I'm out a little bit ahead, and you got to come up there and catch me, right? Great thing, because if we don't have those measures and those metrics of timing or something in front of us to go and catch, it's going to affect how hard we push, and we want to be able to utilize this to the nth degree. Now, box jumps as well. We're doing our box jumps about 3 sets of 10 is what I did with them. You could justify a little less than 10 reps to focus more on that explosiveness, but we did the box jumps on the ring side, right? So we had a full boxing ring, meaning it was elevated to the full height of a standard boxing ring for competition, and box jumping on top of that. And then I would put plates on top of the ring side so that then, therefore, they would have to jump even higher to get that maximum explosiveness and snap with the feet, because outside of a basic level of aerobic conditioning, your ability to snap and explode is very, very important in boxing. All right. And then clap push-ups as well, because we got those legs locked. We got a little bit of hands, and arms with the sprinting, but then also now the clap push-ups. Again, you could justify doing a little bit less than 10 reps, but about 3 sets. And they are, going down, exploding up, clapping, going back down, sometimes doing a double clap, things like that. And the focus is maximum explosion and maximum stretch reflex turnaround to explode up with it. And this does help with snapping the arms with the punches. And then after that, how often are we going to do this stuff, right? That's it. That's the only conditioning stuff this person did besides their boxing work, all right? So we did boxing training about 3 to 4 times a week, and we did conditioning about 3 times a week, all right? So there was about a 4th day, it was just boxing work. And that was split up maybe with like a day of rest in between. Sometimes days were back to back, but they had about 3 or so days a week of not doing much, right? And this is important, especially for starting out, because it allows the body time to adapt. Because even though this person was a football player, the body is going to be under a lot of stress, and you're going to hold yourself back if you get injured. And the less you can get injured, the less you will hold yourself back. Unless you'll have chronic injuries that then therefore stay with you and plague you throughout your entire boxing career. It's something you don't think about oftentimes, but sometimes less is absolutely more. Something as well that I want to touch on before we talk about these different phases is that I'll save this for the 3rd phase, because we're about to jump into our phases. All right, so you have phase 1, which is the skill acquisition. This phase is essential to just focus on this, all right? Now, don't get me wrong. Like if you train with us in one of our facilities and things like that, we're going to check a lot of boxes, all right? But again, we're talking about just the quintessential, most important stuff. When you're first starting off with boxing and looking to progress, skill acquisition needs to be your primary focus, not I'm going to get in the best shape of my life and this, that, and the other thing. It's skill acquisition. And you will get in better shape for boxing-specific things, activities, movements through doing this, all right? And through, like Chuck Bodak would say, through proper technique, you will produce speed, right? Through greasing the groove and learning the proper technique, you will be faster, hit harder, and everything else. You need to realize that there's a lot of gold to be mined there. And only once a lot of the gold has been mined there does other things help it, all right? But I've seen plenty of guys spend a lot of time, focus on a lot of different exercises to try to make them more powerful or in better shape and things like that, and they don't spend the time on skill acquisition, and there's only so much they can get from it. Versus mining all the gold from skill acquisition, or at least a good amount of it, getting some depth on it, getting some good returns on it. And then when you put on top of that cake other things, then you're going to have more success, all right? And so that's where we go into phase number 2. We have the skill acquisition, and then we're going to add in the conditioning and add in sparring, all right? So for a month or so, or sometimes a couple months, depending, it's just skill acquisition. You're doing your shadow boxing, your maybe mitt work, things like that, and that's it. And you're doing it, once you get it, you're doing it hard. You're going hard because we're building up that adaptation of our body, right? Specific adaptations to impose demands. Very basic concept, but very important concept most people overlook. Then in phase 2, the next couple months, we're putting into more conditioning and sparring, adding in those sprints, the ring box jumps and clap push-ups, things like that. That's what I did with this individual. It's kind of like a month of skill acquisition. Then we got into phase 2, the conditioning and the sparring, adding that in. And then we're going to go to our next phase, which is actually prepping for competition. And this is where I'm going to talk about the ideas of training volume and things like that. I've had someone recently where they were a little bit overtrained for their fight and it hurt their performance. They still did fine, but man, they didn't feel good. And so it's very important. And with my father's philosophy and Bodak's philosophy, they would absolutely agree with this, is that you think about it this way. It's like you're cooking a dinner, right? You're cooking some type of meat, right? Cooking a chicken. And you can overcook the chicken, right? Same thing goes with your conditioning. You can get yourself and your preparation to a point where you are cooked. You are ready to go, right? You're ready for the dinner. But if you put it in longer, or if you leave it in the oven longer, it doesn't mean it's going to get better. It gets overcooked. And the same thing can happen. You can see guys get stale. And you can tell in their fights they're not as snappy. They're again, a good term or a way to view it is stale. They look stale. And So that can sometimes be you. So you need to watch out for that. You would rather be slightly, very slightly undertrained versus slightly overtrained, right? Because slightly undertrained, you have some energy reserves left, all right? You're not painfully sore, achy like you can be when you're overtrained. That's going to affect your performance in your fight and your fights, plural. So very, very important concept. Don't overcook yourself, all right? And you can't lose conditioning in a week. So therefore, like the week of your fight, start tapering down, specifically those first couple days or those last couple days before. You're not going to get in better shape in the next couple days, right? Let's say it's like Wednesday right now, you're going to fight this Saturday. Like, hey, look, champ, get some work in today, but Thursday, Friday, take it easy. Just move around a little bit, but don't freaking work out hard or anything at all. You want to go in feeling fresh because that is where you're going to have your best moments, all right? And I've seen guys do that and be very successful. I've seen guys not listen to that advice and struggle, all right? So very, very, very important. Now, the last thing is, what did this person do outside of the gym, all right? Besides just like basic eating right and things like that. But the skill and boxing technique part, because I'm not going to get into diet at this moment, what they did outside of the gym was they studied film. But again, I took them from zero to being, to winning a tournament in less than a year. I just had them watch. Because again, this is my first guy that I had when I was coaching, that first started coaching. And I'm going off of the foundations of my father and of Chuck Bodak. So who am I going to have him watch? I'm going to have him watch Sugar Ray Robinson. All right, so that's all they would watch. On the way down to the tournament, they were watching Sugar Ray Robinson. At the tournament, they were watching Sugar Ray Robinson, and they just did their best attempt to be Sugar Ray Robinson. And that's it. That's all they did. That's all they focused on. And they just watched so much of that they were able to put vicious combinations together, a little bit like Sugar Ray Robinson, and be able to jab like Sugar Ray Robinson. And it made them very, very successful. All right. Now, by the way, I'm going to put a link in below I have a whole bunch of fight studies of like Joe Louis and a lot of other fighters that are going to be very important for you to watch. I recommend you go through all those fight studies, watch all those. The link will be in the description below, so make sure you check that out. And then also as well, we need to talk about how we develop the will, because we talked about the skill and the conditioning in this video, right? The very next video you need to watch is the psychology of boxing. If you already watched that video, watch it again, because again, we need those three concepts: the will, we need the skill, and we need the conditioning as well. So make sure you go and check that out.